The kitchen counter was cold against my forearm as I leaned in for a glass of water. It was past midnight, and a strange quiet had settled over our large San Francisco home, a quiet broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. I'd just come back from a late shift at the clinic, my head buzzing with patient charts and family worries. As I reached for a glass, a low murmur caught my ear. Ricardo. He was in his study, a room usually silent after 10 p.m. I paused, curious. His voice was hushed, urgent, and sharp. If he finds out what I did last night, she'll be ruined. I need the assets moved by morning, or everything falls apart. My hand froze on the glass. Ruined. Assets. A cold dread seeped into my bones, colder than the counter. Who was she? And what had Ricardo done? The words echoed, loud in the sudden silence of my mind. A knot tightened in my stomach. I carefully backed away, my heart thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I had to know more, but I couldn't let him know I'd heard. The fear for her, and for what this meant for us, was a heavy weight. If you've ever felt a chill like that, a sudden, terrifying shift in your world, you know exactly how I felt. Please, subscribe to our channel for more stories like this. Like and comment where you are watching from. The next morning, Ricardo was a perfect picture of a loving husband and a busy executive. He hummed a tune as he made coffee, asking about my late night at the clinic, his smile bright and easy. "Rough night, mi amor?" he asked, pouring me a cup. I managed a tight smile, trying to keep my breathing even. The smell of fresh coffee filled the kitchen, but it couldn't cover the bitter taste in my mouth. I focused on stirring my sugar, avoiding his eyes. I was terrified he would see the secret burning behind mine. Was this the man I married, capable of such cold words? Or was this a stranger wearing his face? As he leaned over to kiss my cheek, I noticed something small, almost invisible, a tiny, faint scratch on his wrist, like a thorn had grazed him. He'd said he was at the office late, working on a big deal. The office didn't have thorns. The detail flickered in my mind, a tiny inconsistency that suddenly felt huge. His cheerful act felt like a flimsy curtain, barely hiding a dark stage behind it. With Ricardo off to work and Sophia safely at school, the house felt too large, too silent. The silence was not peaceful. It was heavy with questions. I couldn't just sit. My years working for a charity, tracing missing funds and connections, had taught me how to look without being noticed. I wouldn't touch Ricardo's computer, that was too risky. Instead, I went to his desk and subtly checked his large, leather-bound planner. It was open to yesterday's date. Amidst the usual corporate jargon, one entry stood out: DA Dinner, Starlight Hotel. My stomach churned. The Starlight Hotel was famous, not for cozy dinners, but for hosting quiet, high-stakes corporate meetings, especially those that needed to stay out of the public eye. It wasn't a place for a casual meal, and it certainly didn't fit with his late night at the office story. The tension of holding this secret, this heavy knowledge, felt like a constant tremor under my skin. Every happy memory of us now had a shadow clinging to it. Later that afternoon, I took Sophia to the craft store. She needed special glitter glue for a school project, something sparkly and bright. When I handed my credit card to the cashier, it beeped, and the machine flashed, declined. My cheeks burned with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry, there must be a mistake," I stammered, trying a different card. That one was also declined. Back home, my hands trembled as I dialed the bank. After a tense conversation, the representative informed me, in a flat, polite voice, that my supplementary cards had been cancelled yesterday. Under the primary account holder's authority, "Ma'am," she explained. Ricardo. He had cut off my access to our joint funds, without a word. The dread from the night before intensified into a sharp, icy fear. This wasn't just a secret, it was a deliberate act, a move to control me, to isolate me financially. The word ruined echoed again, now feeling very, very personal. Sophia came bounding in after school, her backpack nearly as big as she was. "Mama, look what I made," she beamed, holding up a brightly colored drawing. And guess what? A nice man gave me this to give to Papa. She pulled a small, folded piece of paper from her pocket. My breath hitched. A man she'd never seen before? My heart pounded. Oh, honey, let me see, I said, trying to keep my voice light. I gently took the note. It wasn't addressed to Ricardo, but had a name Adriana didn't recognize, scrawled in hasty handwriting. My eyes scanned the contents. Just one chilling sentence. The deal is signed. Now, the cleanup. The words hit me like a physical blow. Cleanup. What kind of deal needed a cleanup? The world felt like it was tilting, every ordinary moment now laced with a sinister undertone. Sophia skipped off to play, oblivious, while I stood frozen, the tiny note a heavy weight in my hand. The name on the note, Mariposa, didn't ring any bells from Ricardo's corporate life. But Mariposa. It was Spanish for butterfly. And butterflies were a symbol used by a high-profile charity I'd once worked for, a group called Alas de Esperanza, Wings of Hope. My heart raced. Could she refer to the charity? Or someone connected to it? My mind flashed back to my time there 5 years ago, helping vulnerable families. Ricardo had been so proud of my work then. The idea that he might be targeting a charity, especially one I cared about, felt sickening. I pulled out my old laptop, rarely used now, and started searching. My old contacts, the charity's public records, news articles from years past. The name Mariposa seemed too much of a coincidence. This wasn't just a personal betrayal. It was starting to feel like something far bigger, with much wider consequences. My old mentor, Javier, was difficult to reach. He'd left the charity years ago, quietly, under a cloud of unspoken reasons. When he finally agreed to meet me, it was in a bustling park, far from any corporate buildings. He looked tired, his eyes holding a sadness I didn't remember. Adriana, why now? He asked, his voice low. I showed him the note, explained about Ricardo's strange behavior, the cancelled cards. Javier's face tightened. Ricardo was involved with Alas de Esperanza, Adriana, he said softly. Just before your wedding, he pushed the board to invest a huge sum in a shady real estate deal. Said it was for future growth, but it was high risk, beneficial only to a few people. He paused, looking away. I always suspected he was using the charity's name to make himself rich. The truth hit me like a splash of cold water. Ricardo had used my charity, my passion, as a stepping stone for his own ambition. That night, after Ricardo was asleep, I slipped into his study. My heart was a drum against my ribs. I knew his habits, his need for order. I scanned his bookshelves, his organized files. Nothing seemed out of place. But then my eyes caught it, a large modern painting he'd bought a year ago, an abstract piece that had never quite fit the room's traditional decor. I remembered him insisting on it, despite my mild dislike. There was a tiny, almost invisible scratch on the back of the frame, where it met the wall. My fingers traced it. With renewed purpose, I carefully lifted the heavy painting off its hooks. Behind it, precisely in the center of the wall, was a small, locked safe, neatly recessed. My breath caught. My suspicion had been right. There was something hidden here. The air in the study felt thick with secrets, and I was about to unlock one of them. My hands trembled as I faced the safe. I tried the obvious, our anniversary, Sophia's birthday, my birthday. Nothing. The digital keypad remained stubbornly dark. Frustration gnawed at me. Ricardo was too clever for simple codes. I sat on the floor, trying to think like him. What was truly important to Ricardo? What was a turning point? Then it clicked. I remembered him once boasting, just after we met, about the exact date of the deal that changed everything. The real estate deal Javier had mentioned, the one that propelled Ricardo's career. My fingers flew over the keypad, entering the precise date of that transaction. Beep. The small safe door clicked open with a soft thud. Inside, tucked away, was a single, small, black leather-bound ledger. It looked old, worn, out of place among Ricardo's pristine office. I carefully pulled out the black ledger. Its pages were filled with neat, handwritten entries, not names, but code words, each paired with large sums of money and specific dates. My eyes scanned for anything familiar. Then I saw it. Mariposa. And next to it, an enormous transaction, followed by the chilling word, cleanup. My blood ran cold. Mariposa. That was the pet name Ricardo used for his sister, Clara, who had died tragically young years ago. He rarely spoke of her. The ledger entries stretched back, past Clara's death, almost to the date of that pivotal real estate deal. This wasn't just about corporate fraud. It was something deeply, disturbingly personal, tied to his family, to death itself. The realization made the hairs on my arms stand up. What kind of secret involved a dead sister and a cleanup? The next morning, I drove to the cemetery, a place I hadn't visited in years. The air was cool and still among the silent headstones. I found Clara Herrera's grave, marked with a beautiful ornate stone. Ricardo brought flowers every year. But as I looked closer, my heart began to pound. The stone looked too new. Not just cleaned, but almost as if it had been placed recently. And the dates inscribed, while close to what I remembered, had a subtle inconsistency with the online death record I'd quickly looked up at home. A horrifying thought began to form in my mind. What if Clara wasn't really buried here? What if her death, or at least the circumstances of it, had been part of this cleanup? The idea that Ricardo would use his own sister's memory for a scheme was a cold, brutal twist that I never could have imagined. Sleep became impossible. I pretended to be asleep next to Ricardo, my eyes wide open, watching the digital clock. Just after 1 a.m., I heard it. The soft click of his study door, then the creak of floorboards. He was sneaking out. I waited a moment, then quietly slipped out of bed, grabbing my keys. I checked the house cameras on my phone. Ricardo wasn't getting into his car. He was walking, moving stealthily through the dark. He always drove, even for short distances. This was different. My heart hammered, a mix of fear and grim resolve. I found my older, less noticeable car and backed it out of the garage, following him at a safe distance. The night air was chilly, but a different kind of cold was seeping into my veins, pushing me forward into the unknown. Ricardo led me on a winding route, through neighborhoods I rarely visited, eventually arriving at a modest, unmarked apartment building. It was far from his usual corporate haunts, tucked away in a quiet, older part of the city. He didn't ring a doorbell. He used a key, letting himself in quickly. I parked down the street, my hands clutching the steering wheel. Was it another woman? The thought, though painful, felt almost simpler than the web of lies I was uncovering. I got out of my car and moved closer, trying to see through a ground floor window. And there he was. Ricardo inside, but not with a mistress. He was talking to a frail older woman in a wheelchair, her face pale and drawn. She was clearly being hidden, confined to this apartment. Who was she? I called Javier again, my voice shaking as I told him about the hidden woman and my horrifying suspicion about Clara's grave. Javier listened in silence, his breath catching when I described the woman in the wheelchair. Adriana, he said, his voice barely a whisper. That sounds like Beatriz. Ricardo's mother. My jaw dropped. Beatriz? But she was supposed to be living in Mexico. Javier explained, his voice heavy with guilt. Years ago, Beatriz had been involved in a fatal accident. Ricardo, desperate to protect her from jail and his own reputation, had covered it up. He used Clara's identity for a massive insurance fraud, making it seem like Clara was the victim and Beatriz had disappeared. He then hid his mother, keeping her a prisoner in that apartment to protect his secret. The last night from Ricardo's phone call was the anniversary of that accident, or perhaps a new phase of the cover-up. The next day, Ricardo was at work. I took a deep breath and drove to the hidden apartment. I needed to see Beatriz, to talk to her. I put on a crisp, professional jacket and carried a clipboard, pretending to be a social worker. When Beatriz opened the door, her eyes widened, startled. She was even frilier up close. I quickly explained I was doing a wellness check. She was hesitant at first, but something in my earnestness, perhaps my own fear, must have gotten through to her. As I prepared to leave, she pressed something into my hand, a tiny rolled-up photograph. Her eyes pleaded with me. When I unrolled it later, my breath hitched. It wasn't Clara. It was a picture of me, from about 5 years ago, with long hair and a bright, hopeful smile. But wait. My hair was shorter then. The woman in the photo looked exactly like my twin sister Maria. Ricardo's she was Maria. My twin sister, Maria. We hadn't spoken properly in 5 years. We'd had a terrible fight when she went into the cutthroat corporate world, a world I found so cold and uncaring. I'd gone into charity work. She'd gone for power. The photograph Beatrice gave me, showing Maria looking so much like me in those early days, felt like a ghost. Ricardo wasn't trying to destroy the charity. He was trying to destroy her. Maria had started her own ethical tech company, a direct competitor to one of Ricardo's biggest clients. He was trying to ruin Maria's new venture, not out of passion, but to protect his own empire and stop an ethical rival from exposing his dirty dealings. The cleanup was the removal of a threat to his power, and that threat was my own flesh and blood. The betrayal now felt infinitely deeper, twisting an old family wound into a fresh, bleeding cut. Ricardo, sensing my quietness, must have felt the distance between us. He came home one evening with an overly bright smile. "Mi amor, I know things have been stressful," he said, taking my hands. "I want to show you how much I trust you." He pulled out a shiny new credit card, my old one, reactivated, and then showed me his laptop screen, a massive joint investment account he'd opened, with my name on it. "See," he said, his eyes searching mine. "Complete trust. You have full access, everything." My stomach churned. It was a tactic, a way to pull me back, to make me doubt what I knew. I forced a small smile, taking the card. "Thank you, Ricardo," I whispered, the words tasting like ash. I knew I had to play along, to make him believe I was still in his control, just for a little while longer. It was the hardest acting I've ever had to do. The task of finding Maria was both easy and incredibly difficult. We had a strained emotional reunion at a small coffee shop in the city. She looked tougher, colder, but her eyes, when she saw me, still held a flicker of our shared past. "Adriana, what is this?" she asked, her voice sharp. I laid out everything. The ledger, Beatrice's story, Ricardo's scheme, the cancelled cards, the threat to her company. Maria listened, her face growing paler with each detail. She was a CEO, used to manipulation, but this level of calculated cruelty, involving family, was clearly a shock. "Ricardo, he can't do this," she whispered, her voice cracking. "My company is built on transparency." I explained my plan. It was risky, but it was the only way to expose him fully and clear Maria's name. She looked at me, a glimmer of the old Maria in her eyes. "Okay," she said, "I'm in." Armed with Maria's trust, the plan began. The reinstated joint investment account was my weapon. I initiated a series of large, rapid transactions, not to steal, but to trigger immediate alerts on Ricardo's private, hidden accounts. I knew his need for absolute control, his paranoia about anything touching his secret funds. This was a digital tripwire. He would see the activity, panic, and immediately try to shut it down, which meant he would log into his most secure private accounts from his home computer. He'd use his own private credentials, thinking he was safe. My heart pounded as I typed, knowing that with each click, I was pushing him closer to exposure. It felt cold, calculated, but also fiercely righteous. This wasn't just revenge. It was about protecting my sister, Ricardo's mother, and ultimately, myself and Sophia. The trap worked faster than I expected. Ricardo burst through the front door, his face a mask of fury. "Adriana, what have you done with the accounts?" he demanded, rushing to his study. He slammed the door, muttering furiously as he powered up his computer. I waited, my breath held tight in my chest. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, I opened the study door. Ricardo looked up, his fingers poised over the keyboard, his eyes blazing with anger. But his gaze faltered, then widened in pure, unadulterated shock. Standing quietly in the doorway, frail but undeniably present, was Beatriz, his mother, pushed gently into the room by Javier. Ricardo froze, his face draining of color. The laptop screen glowed, exposing his private accounts, but all his attention was locked on his mother. He was caught, exposed, and absolutely stunned. Beatriz's gaze, though soft, held an unwavering strength I hadn't seen before. She looked at Ricardo, then at me. "The secret is killing me, Ricardo," she said, her voice a reedy whisper, but clear as a bell. "I cannot live like this anymore." Ricardo's face crumpled. He stammered, trying to explain, to control her, but it was too late. Beatriz, with my quiet encouragement and Javier's support, had decided to break free. She had already spoken to a lawyer Adriana had contacted. Her choice wasn't about revenge, but about her own peace, her own freedom from the cage Ricardo had built for her. Her words, so simple, removed Ricardo's last shred of emotional leverage. The carefully constructed world of lies he had maintained for years began to crumble around him. Not with a bang, but with the quiet courage of a mother choosing truth over silence. The next day, the boardroom was a tense, hushed arena. Ricardo, looking disheveled and frantic, was trying to regain control of a meeting spiraling out of his grasp. Then, the doors opened. My sister Maria walked in, head held high, looking formidable and utterly in command. Ricardo's eyes widened in disbelief. Maria didn't make a scene. She simply took her place at the table and, with cold precision, began to present. Not just general accusations, but specific, undeniable evidence from Ricardo's old ledger, now authenticated by Javier's testimony, about the fraudulent real estate deal years ago. This wasn't to destroy Ricardo's company, but to prove her own company's ethical foundation and expose his deeply unethical practices. The faces of the board members shifted from shock to dawning horror as Ricardo's empire began to crack. I walked into that boardroom, not as Ricardo's wife, but as Adriana Muñoz, a woman finally free. The whispers started immediately, but I ignored them. I didn't come to gloat or to accuse. I came to make a statement. I announced my immediate divorce from Ricardo. Then I spoke not of his crimes, but of a new beginning. I explained my intention to establish a foundation, a last Overheard, Wings of Truth, dedicated to helping families affected by corporate fraud and elder abuse, inspired by Beatriz's journey. I pledged a substantial portion of my own assets, my doctor's savings, to start it. My voice was clear, firm, and filled with a resolve that came from deep within. This wasn't cruel revenge. It was a firm, heart-led justice, turning my pain into purpose. As Ricardo was escorted from the boardroom by security, his face contorted with rage and disbelief, he saw me. He tried to speak, to lash out, but his words caught in his throat. I met his gaze steadily, unflinching. Then, I reached into my purse. With a quiet grace, I pulled out the shining reactivated credit card he had given me just days before, the symbol of his supposed trust and financial control. I held it out to him. "This," I said, my voice calm but firm, "never truly belonged to me. Keep it." He stared at it, then at me, the final cutting realization dawning in his eyes. It wasn't just his business that was ruined, it was his control, his perception of power. Giving him back his symbol of control, proving its utter meaninglessness to me, was the quiet, poetic justice he truly deserved. Months passed like healing balm. Our old house, once so silent and cold, was sold. Maria and I, side by side, poured our energy into a last Overheard. We found a beautiful older building with good light, and we, along with volunteers, lovingly renovated it. The walls, once bare, were soon covered with Sophia's colorful drawings. "Mama, look." Sophia beamed one morning, holding up a drawing of 3 figures, 2 women holding hands, and a child between them, surrounded by a vibrant garden. "It's our forever garden." My heart swelled. I finally felt safe, truly safe. No longer defined by Ricardo's secrets or his empty promises, I was defined by choice, by truth, by the family I was actively building. I looked at Maria, then at Sophia, then around the sunlit room of our new foundation. The greatest power, I realized, wasn't found in wealth or control, but in choosing to stand for truth, in helping others, and in planting new roots of love and belonging. If this story resonated with you, if you believe in the power of truth and second chances, please like, comment, and share. And if you're ready to reclaim your own story, subscribe to our channel for more tales of courage and healing.